Maya Collins had one rule at work, and it was this: keep moving. She had made the rule at 19, on her first real month on the floor, when a man at table 3 had snapped his fingers at her while she was already 3 feet from him with his order in her hands, and she had felt something flare through her chest that she did not trust herself to show. So she had handed him his food without a word and walked to the back room and stood with both palms flat on the cold steel of the prep counter and breathed for 2 full minutes before she could trust that her face was going to look like a professional person and not like someone who had something to say about what had just been done to her. 2 minutes is a long time in restaurant work. You can set 5 tables and clear 4 and run 2 food orders in 2 minutes. Standing still for 2 minutes costs something real. But she stood there anyway, because she had learned in that moment, on the spot, that the only way to survive this kind of work without becoming someone she didn't want to be was to absorb the things that hit her and not carry them forward. Process and continue. Feel it. Set it down. Walk back out. 6 years later, the rule was not something she said out loud or thought about consciously. It had been practiced into something below consciousness, something the body did the way the body does things it has learned to do without asking. Her coworkers called it the Maya glide, the particular quality of movement she had through a full section during a dinner rush, fast but not hurried, fluid without being careless, always exactly where she needed to be without appearing to rush to get there. She had not developed this on purpose. It had developed through 6 years of moving through rooms with a full tray in both hands and a section of 12 tables that all needed things at different intervals, learning through sheer repetition how to move inside the math of the job without fighting it. She was better at the job than almost everyone who worked alongside her, including some who had been doing it for twice as long. She was better at it not because she was faster or stronger or because she possessed some unusual quality of grace, but because she had learned, through the accumulating experience of 6 years of 5-hour blocks of managing multiple simultaneous demands from people she had never met and would never meet again, how to stay inside the job instead of riding above it. How to be fully present in the room she was in and not half somewhere else in her head. How to read a table the way you read a face, with accuracy and without making the reading obvious. She liked it. She had never quite admitted this out loud, to Carrie or to her mother or to anyone who asked what she was doing with herself. She said, "It pays the bills, it's flexible, I'm good at it, maybe something else later." She said things in that general category. But the truth, which she held privately without much drama, was that she liked the job. She liked the pace and the puzzle-solving quality of a full section and the way a good shift felt at the end, not triumphant exactly, but competent. The satisfying physical fatigue of a body that had worked well. She liked the rooms she worked in and the variety of people who passed through them and the specific kind of intimacy that comes from serving people in the particular vulnerability of eating, which makes most people either their best selves or their worst selves and not much in between. She was 28 years old and she was a waitress, and she had stopped apologizing for that, quietly and to herself, approximately 2 years ago. It was a Tuesday evening in October and the dinner rush had tapered into its last hour. She liked this hour. The weekend crowd was gone, the high-volume, high-maintenance tables that arrived in parties and ordered expensive things and talked loudly about private matters as though the people carrying their food were either invisible or incapable of understanding English. Tuesday evenings brought in a different demographic, people who wanted to eat a good meal in a warm room and were capable of interacting with staff as though staff were people. They said please and thank you without it being a performance. They looked at the menu with genuine interest. They did not snap their fingers. She was carrying a tray of water glasses toward the back section, running the automatic split attention calculations. Table 9 needs its check, table 7 is close to ordering dessert. She needs to circle back to table 3 for a wine refresh within the next 4 minutes, when she saw the man in booth 4 put his hand on the woman's wrist. She saw it peripherally, the way you see things in rooms when your brain has been trained to process rooms at a particular level of resolution. She was not looking at booth 4. She was not thinking about booth 4. She saw it the way you hear a specific frequency of sound in a crowded room, your name, someone crying, breaking glass, because your system has learned to register certain signals regardless of where your attention is pointed. She set the tray down on the nearest surface. She did not look at where she was setting it. The rapid internal inventory that followed was practiced and silent and ran in under 3 seconds. Where was Greg? Where was Lily? Where was Owen? Who else had a sightline to what she had just seen? Greg was in the kitchen managing a delivery dispute that had been running since the start of the shift. Lily was 23 and 3 months in, and her instinct in uncertain situations was still to wait for someone senior to act first. Owen had his back to the room. The hostess near the front was occupied with a party trying to seat without a reservation. She was the one who had seen it. The second rule, the one beneath the first, the one that was not a rule she had written down anywhere or said to anyone but that had formed itself in her over years of being in rooms with people, was simpler and harder, and this: if you are the one who has seen it, you are the one who has to do something. She walked to booth 4. The woman was perhaps 30. Dark hair pulled back from a face that was arranged into an expression of composed blankness that Maya recognized without being able to say from which specific memory. It was a cumulative recognition, built from 6 years of reading people in rooms, of noticing the difference between faces that were genuinely calm and faces that were working very hard to look genuinely calm. This was the second kind. The expression of someone who had decided, at some point before this evening, that showing nothing was significantly safer than showing anything. Her dress was pale blue. Her earrings were pearl, small and round, and exactly the kind of earring that said, "I am always appropriate, I always know the right thing to wear, I have never let them see me flustered." She was sitting with her body turned fractionally away from the man across from her, the lean of someone who cannot increase the physical distance between herself and another person and is doing the only thing left available to her with her posture. The man was in his mid to late 50s and wore his money with the particular ease of someone who had been wearing money for long enough that he had stopped noticing he was wearing it. His jacket was expensive not because it was showy but because it fit perfectly and was made of something that had been expensive before anyone touched it, and you could see this quality if you knew how to look for it and didn't need to see a label to know what it meant. He had a face that expected to be taken seriously as a default state of affairs, and he was looking at the woman across from him with an expression that Maya could not reduce to a single word. It was complex enough to have multiple things running in it at once, but what lived at the center of it, what organized the rest of it, was a particular certainty about what belonged to him and what the proper arrangement of the world was, and where this woman sat within that arrangement. His hand was on her wrist. Not touching in the way of affection or care. Gripping. The kind of grip that keeps someone still. The kind that leaves a different kind of mark than the visible one. "Excuse me," Maya said. She was standing beside the booth now, and her voice was even in the way she had trained her voice to be even, the specific even of someone who has learned that the quality of your voice in certain moments is half the work. "Is there anything I can get for either of you this evening?" The man looked up at her. His gaze moved over her with the efficiency of someone who has spent many years in rooms with service staff and has a well-established system for cataloging them, identifies their function, notes that they are performing it, returns to what was happening before. "We're fine," he said. He did not let go of her wrist. Maya looked at the woman instead. "Ma'am," she said, quietly, at a register that was aimed at the woman and not at the man, "I can show you where the restroom is, if you'd like a moment. Or I'm happy to get the manager if there's anything you need." It was a code. Not a secret one, there was nothing secret about it. It was the language women in certain situations recognized the instant they heard it, because it is spoken in the cadence of a door being held open from the inside rather than being unlocked from the outside. A way out offered rather than pushed. Maya had said it 3 times in 6 years and had learned it from a woman named Dorothy who had been waiting tables for 30 years and who said, "You say it quietly, you don't make it a scene, and you let them decide. Always let them decide." The woman looked at her. Something moved across the careful blankness. A shift in the eyes, the very smallest shift, that said, she had heard. She had understood what was being offered. The man's grip tightened. "I said we're fine. Lower register now." The volume of a voice that wants the message to carry no further than the table. You can go back to your section. Maya was aware, at the edge of her attention, of the restaurant going quiet. Not all at once, not dramatically, the way a room goes quiet when the air changes, when something in it shifts from the ordinary frequency of a Tuesday dinner into a frequency the room's other occupants register at the level of instinct. The couple at table 5 had paused mid-sentence. Owen, the bartender, had turned from the shelves. The hostess near the door had shifted her weight. Maya took a small step to the left. She made it look like she was adjusting her position to clear the edge of the booth. She put herself between the table and the main aisle that led to the exit. It was not a block. It was a presence. The statement that a body makes in space when it does not step back. "Sir," she said, and she looked at him now, directly, with the kind of eye contact that is not hostile but is not deferring either, the eye contact of a person who has decided on a position. "I need you to let go of her arm." Silence in the room now. Real silence, the kind that has weight. The man stood up. He rose from the booth and the full dimension of him was revealed in a way that booth seating had compressed, tall, broad through the shoulders, with the physical presence of a man who had spent a long time in rooms where his size was part of the language he spoke, where standing up meant something, where other people adjusted around what his body communicated. He looked down at Maya and the distance between them was perhaps 4 feet and charged the way distances become charged when one person is deciding something. Maya did not step back. She would think about this later, not with pride exactly but with the honest clarity she applied to most things she did. She had been afraid. Not the loud kind of fear that freezes or runs. The quiet kind that informs you without directing you, that says here is what this could become and leaves you to decide. The fear was present. It was not in charge of her. She had learned, through years of difficult tables and late nights and moments that required nerve she wasn't sure she had until she used it, that fear and action could occupy the same body at the same time, and the one that was in charge was the one you chose. "You," he said, in a voice that was very quiet and very controlled, "have absolutely no idea who you are speaking to." "That's true," Maya said. "But I can see what I'm looking at." He stood there for 3 more seconds. She counted them in the back of her mind the way she counted tables' wait times and section coverage, not thinking about the count, just tracking it. 1, 2, 3. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket with one hand and withdrew a card. She saw only the edge of it, the heavy cream-colored cardstock that communicated a specific category of person, and placed it on the table between them with the precision of someone who wants it understood that every action he takes is deliberate and measured. He straightened his jacket with one flat-handed gesture. He looked at Maya for one more moment with an expression that contained no overt threat, and that was nonetheless one of the more uncomfortable things she had been looked at with in her life. He walked to the door and pushed through it without looking back. The restaurant took its breath. Maya turned back to booth 4. The woman was sitting exactly as she had been sitting, but something had changed in the room around her. The pressure that had been holding everything at a particular tension had released, and in its release the woman seemed both smaller and more visible, the way things look when the context around them changes. Her wrist, the one that had been held, was against her chest, cradled there with both hands in the unconscious protective gesture of someone holding something that hurts without letting themselves acknowledge it hurts. Her eyes were on the door. Her hands were shaking. Barely. The finest possible trembling, the kind that only shows when you know to look for it. "Are you all right?" Maya asked, and kept her voice the way you keep a voice when you want it to make space rather than demand an answer. The woman turned and looked at her, and the composed blankness that had organized her face for the past several minutes cracked open, not into anything raw or exposed or dramatic, but into something genuine. Something that was layered and complicated and made of things that had been accumulating longer than tonight. She looked at Maya with that expression, and it was the most honest thing Maya had yet seen from her, and also the one she was least equipped to name. "You shouldn't have done that for me," the woman said. Her voice was low and precisely articulated, carrying a faint accent that was the accent of someone who had learned English from very formal and very good teachers a long time ago, so that the language still had its edges and its architecture intact, the way old buildings have their original lines where newer ones have been softened. You really, truly, should not have done that. Maya heard it as shock coming out sideways. She had heard versions of it before, the inverted gratitude of people in the immediate aftermath of something they hadn't been prepared for, the mind still processing, the words arriving in the wrong order. She filed it there. She offered water. The woman accepted it. She held the glass in both hands the way you hold something cold when you need to feel where you are. Maya gave her space. She moved through her section, cleared a table, brought a check, moved back through. The woman sat and composed herself with a speed and thoroughness that was itself something to notice, not the gradual reassembly of a person who had been shaken, but the rapid, practiced, deliberate reassembly of someone who had done this before. Who knew exactly how to find the pieces of herself she needed and put them back. Maya asked once more if she should call someone. The woman said no, someone was coming, with the certainty of a person stating a fact about the physical laws of her life. Someone would come because someone always came. 23 minutes later a black car arrived at the curb. Not in a hurried way. In the manner of black cars that arrive where and when they are supposed to. The woman rose. She smoothed the front of her dress once, a single gesture. She walked across the restaurant with the unhurried pace of someone for whom no room had ever been able to make her hurry. At the door she paused and turned and looked across the dining room at Maya, and the expression she wore in that moment was the one Maya could not name, the one that pressed against the inside of her chest with a weight that had no clear shape, and then she was gone, the door swinging closed behind her. Under the bread plate in booth 4, 3 $50 bills, folded cleanly. Left with deliberation. Maya pocketed the money. She went back to work. She thought about it on the drive home. Not obsessively, obsessive thinking was not her habit. She turned the 2 sentences over, the 2 she kept returning to. You have no idea who you are speaking to, and you really, truly should not have done that for me. She noted the specific quality of each. Not exactly a threat. Not exactly gratitude. Something that lived in a space adjacent to both. Something that suggested a context she had not had access to. Then she put it in the compartment she kept for things she was done with for the night, and she drove home, and Carrie was there making tea, and Maya ate the pizza that was left from dinner and described the shift as weird, and Carrie said night shifts were generally weird and that was what Maya got for working them, and Maya went to bed. She did not sleep badly. She had not yet understood what Tuesday had set in motion. There is a specific quality to the days immediately following an unusual event when you are trying to decide whether the event was as significant as it felt in the moment, or whether you are simply someone with a tendency to assign more weight to things than they objectively carry. Maya spent the 3 days after Tuesday in that quality. She worked her Wednesday and Thursday shifts. She did her grocery shopping and her laundry. She had an evening on Carrie's couch watching something neither of them was fully attending to. She cooked dinner twice and ate cereal the other times, which was her own personal measure of how much cognitive bandwidth the rest of her life was taking up. She applied herself to the project of treating Tuesday as Tuesday and nothing more, which is a project that mostly works if the event in question cooperates by staying Tuesday-sized. It did not cooperate. There was the man at the bar. She did not notice him on Wednesday. That was the thing she would think about later, that she had been in the same room with him for an entire shift and had not flagged him, which told her he had been very still and very unremarkable, because she noticed things in rooms and if he had given her anything to notice she would have noted it. So on Wednesday he had been invisible, which, as it turned out, was its own kind of signal. On Thursday she noticed him. He was at the far end of the bar, which was separated from the dining room by a low partition and occupied a comfortable middle position between the 2 spaces, visible from her section, but not quite part of it. He had ordered coffee. The coffee was in front of him and had not been touched. He had been in the same position for approximately 90 minutes when she started paying attention to him, which was not unusual for bar patrons, some of whom treated the bar as a workspace or a waiting room. But the coffee was the detail that kept returning to her. He had ordered coffee and was not drinking it. The coffee was doing its job as something to have in front of you, and that was the only job it was doing. He watched the room. Not in the way of a person taking in their surroundings, the ambient awareness of someone in a public place. In the way that her eyes moved over her section, tracking, cataloging, noting positions and movements and intervals, staying approximately half a second ahead of where he was nominally looking. She recognized the quality of the attention because she performed a version of it herself every shift. It was the attention of a person who was working, in a room that appeared to be somewhere they were simply sitting. When her gaze moved toward his moved away. Not sharply. Not with any visible intention of avoiding her. By exactly the small amount required to seem like he had simply been looking at something in that general direction and happened to stop. She had worked in rooms with people for 6 years. She knew the difference between a person who had not been watching her and a person who was excellent at looking like they hadn't been. She mentioned it to Carrie Thursday morning, during the 11 minutes before Carrie left for work, which was the window Carrie had an informal policy about, available for conversation, but not available for conversations that required more than 11 minutes to be worth having. Carrie said, "You think everyone is watching something. It's your job. You've transferred the skill to contexts where it doesn't apply." "He doesn't eat," Maya said. "He doesn't drink. He sits at the bar with an untouched coffee and watches the room. He's probably killing time before something else. Working remotely. Waiting for someone. He was there Wednesday too." "So he likes the bar," Carrie said, picking up her bag. "People find places they like and they go back. It's how restaurants work. It's your whole industry." "He doesn't like the bar," Maya said. "He doesn't look like he's somewhere he likes. He looks like he's somewhere he's been placed." Carrie stopped with one arm in her coat. She looked at Maya for 3 seconds with the expression she used when she was deciding whether something warranted an exception to the 11-minute rule. "Are you worried about yourself?" Carrie said. "I don't know," Maya said. Carrie finished putting on her coat. "Then I would suggest," she said, "that you go to work and behave normally and see whether there is anything concrete to be worried about before you invest energy in worrying about it." She picked up her keys. "You did one thing on Tuesday. One thing. And it sounds like it was the right thing and now it's over." "Right," Maya said. "Over," Carrie said, for emphasis, and left. On Friday afternoon, Greg called her into the back office before her shift began. Greg had been running the front of house at this restaurant for 18 years. Before that he had managed 2 other establishments, one of which had closed for reasons that were not discussed and one of which he still occasionally spoke about with the particular wistfulness of someone describing a country they had left and did not expect to return to. He was 51 years old and had the specific quality of someone who had managed other people's problems for so long that he had developed a comprehensive immune response to drama. It moved through him without landing. He was good at his job in the ways that mattered operationally and not the ways that required any kind of complex interpersonal navigation, and he knew this about himself, which was the thing that made him better at it than his limitations would suggest. He was behind his desk. He had the look he got when he was about to deliver information that he had not originated and was uncertain about and would very much prefer to have come from someone else. He told her about the booking. Saturday evening, full buyout of the floor, meaning no regular service, all tables reserved for the single event, 12 guests confirmed. The kitchen had been briefed separately and had been given specific requirements that Greg described only as detailed, in the tone of someone who had received the requirements and decided not to look at them too closely. The service tier for the event was their highest formal protocol, the level they used for perhaps 4 events a year, the level that had its own written guidelines for pace and positioning and presentation that every staff member was expected to review before executing. He talked for 3 minutes about these details, in the careful way he described things, and then he stopped. Maya waited. She could tell from the shape of his pause that he was not done. They made a specific request about staffing, he said. For the primary server. He told her. The office was quiet in the specific way that offices go quiet when the room is waiting for a person to process something. By name, Maya said. Not a question. Your full name. They provided it in the booking request. How do they have my name? Greg looked at the surface of his desk, where presumably there was nothing of particular interest, but where his eyes went when he was having a conversation he would prefer to be having differently. The booking was made through a third-party events coordinator, he said. A professional one. We've worked through the same firm before, different clients. They communicated the host's requirements, including the staffing preference. Who is the host? The host prefers to keep the booking confidential until the event. Greg, Maya said, and she kept her voice exactly even. Someone who won't tell you their name asked for me by name. Greg looked up from his desk. He had the look of a man who has run the numbers he is able to run and has arrived at a position he can defend without having fully examined the position. The advance payment was received in full, he said. Wire transfer, this morning, for the full buyout fee plus the event service premium. These arrangements, at this level, often involve privacy expectations that we honor. It's standard in the industry. Standard for who to not know who is coming to their own restaurant, Maya said. Greg did not have an answer to this, which was itself an answer. I told the coordinator I'd need to confirm your availability, he said. Nothing is committed. If you're not comfortable, I can staff the event differently without it being an issue. This was, she recognized, Greg at the outer edge of his moral imagination, giving her the exit without requiring either of them to name the reason she might need it. She went home. She thought about it through the afternoon and into Saturday morning with the particular brand of thinking she disliked in herself, circular, inconclusive, turning the same information over without producing anything new from the turning. She was not someone who usually did this. She was someone who made decisions by running the available information through honest internal appraisal and arriving at a position she could defend, and then she held the position. The trouble was that the available information was incomplete, and the part that was missing was the most important part. Carrie, reading the situation on Saturday afternoon with the accuracy she read most situations, said, "You're already going. You've been going since Thursday. The only thing you're doing right now is the performance of still deciding." I might be walking into something I don't understand, Maya said. You might be, Carrie said. And you might be walking into a regular private dinner event that has nothing to do with Tuesday whatsoever and you'll feel ridiculous on Sunday. Do you think that's what it is? Carrie was quiet for a moment. No, she said. I think it's connected to Tuesday. I think someone with resources looked you up and booked your section to get a look at you. She paused. Which might be alarming or might be a person saying thank you in a very strange and expensive way. Both of those are possible. Which do you think it is? I think, Carrie said carefully, that you should go in wearing the red lipstick and be exactly yourself and see what happens. And I think if anything feels wrong, you get Greg and you leave. And I think you have enough situational intelligence to know the difference between those two outcomes when you see them. Maya considered this. You're being unusually supportive, she said. I'm being practical, Carrie said. You're going either way. I'm just acknowledging the reality. She put on the red lipstick. She went. The restaurant on private event nights had always struck her as a slightly uncanny version of itself. The same room, the same tables, the same floor plan she could navigate in complete darkness after 6 years, made into something different through the accumulation of small intentional adjustments. The lighting lowered and warmed. The music replaced with something more deliberate. Flowers on every surface, fresh and dense, white flowers tonight arranged with the kind of restraint that is more expensive than abundance. The whole room at the angle of a place that understands itself to be playing a specific role and is performing it with conviction. The kitchen staff were running quietly and with focus. The front team was 4 tonight: Maya, Lily, Paul, and Dennis. Greg was on the floor. He had dressed up, slightly, which he did only for these events, and which always gave him the look of a man who had recently found clothes that were his and was slightly surprised by them. The guests arrived from 7:30 onward, over the course of 20 minutes, in the pattern of people for whom being on time is simply what one does and being early would be slightly gauche. They moved through the entrance in 2s and 3s, and the room received them the way rooms receive people they have been prepared for. The men's suits had the same quality as the man from booth 4's jacket, expensive in the quiet, structural way, not requiring inspection to understand. The women wore the kind of clothes that communicated their worth through the cut and the fabric and the total absence of anything that needed to draw attention to itself. Near the entrance, 2 men in suits that were fractionally different from the guests' suits positioned themselves at angles that covered the room and the door simultaneously. Security. Not trying very hard to look like something else. She filed them and moved on. She worked the room. She moved through the formal service with the kind of focused discipline that this tier required, more deliberate in every action, more attuned to timing, operating at the margin where service becomes invisible because it has been executed so well that the guests experience it as simply receiving things rather than someone bringing them. This was the part of the job she found most technically satisfying, the disappearing act of perfect service. The way you could be present in a room and necessary to everything in it and somehow not visible. She noted the table as she moved through it, the way she noted any table. The woman near the center who laughed in a way that was genuine rather than performed, the small, real laugh that people with good laughs produce when something has actually caught them off guard. The young man at the far end of the table, perhaps 25, who held his phone under the edge of the table and checked it with the specific anxious repetition of someone expecting news they were not certain would be good. The older couple to the left of the center who occupied the room with the ease of people who had been in many rooms like this together and had stopped needing to perform enjoyment for each other. She came around the far end of the long center table with the water pitcher. She saw them both at the same moment, in the way that 2 things can land simultaneously when your system has been half expecting one of them and then encounters both. The man at the head of the table was someone she had not seen in person before tonight, though she had seen his photograph in a search result she had found in a freezer. No photograph had prepared her for the quality of presence he carried in a room. He was perhaps 40, with a face that was broad and very still in the specific way that stillness can be not an absence but a discipline, not empty but contained, the way a room is when everything in it is exactly where it should be and nothing is loose. He sat at the head of the table with the kind of gravity that comes not from size alone but from something about the way certain people organize the space around them, as though the room's architecture has made a small rearrangement to accommodate them. His pale eyes moved to her with the immediate precision of someone who had already mapped every person in the room and was simply confirming a previously noted position. Beside him, her left hand resting on the white tablecloth an inch from a wine glass, sat the woman from booth 4 on Tuesday. Maya knew her name now. She had learned it in a freezer. She was not the woman from booth 4, not in the way that the booth 4 encounter would have prepared you for. The pale blue dress was gone. She was wearing something dark and structured and precisely fitted, and her hair was down around her shoulders instead of pulled back, and she was leaning slightly toward the woman across from her in the easy body language of someone following a conversation they were genuinely interested in. The pearl earrings were the same. On her left hand was a ring that caught the candlelight in the quiet, matter-of-fact way of something that required no amplification to communicate everything about itself. She felt Maya's attention, the practiced peripheral awareness of someone who has spent years in rooms where being watched carries consequences, and she turned. Half a second of direct eye contact. Then Elena's expression did something very small and very controlled. It shifted at the frequency below what a room could read, the frequency between what a person shows and what a person is. What the shift communicated was recognition, and weight, and something else beneath those 2 things that Maya felt rather than understood. Then Elena turned back to her conversation, and the shift was gone, and her face was exactly what it needed to be. The man at the head of the table had watched this. When Maya moved to fill his glass, he said, in a low and perfectly even voice with an accent she could not immediately locate, "Thank you." She said, "Of course." She moved to the next chair. For the rest of the service she concentrated entirely on the work in front of her. Every action correct. Every timing call right. No cognitive bandwidth left over for anything else, which was the state she had been trying to achieve and which she achieved. At 9:45 she went to the walk-in freezer on the pretext of a delivery she had invented. She stood in the cold and the humming quiet and she opened her phone and she found out who Nikolai Voss was. 11 minutes later she put her phone in her apron pocket. She took 4 counted breaths. She went back out and finished the service, and she was externally impeccable and internally very, very still. The walk-in freezer at the back of the restaurant was kept at -18 degrees, which was the legally required temperature for the stored proteins and which created, as a useful side effect, a space that no one visited for longer than necessary. Maya had learned over 6 years that it was the only room in the building where nobody followed you. Even if Greg needed her, he would stand at the freezer door and shout rather than come in. She had used this fact before, on bad nights, when she needed 2 minutes that the floor could not give her. She needed 11 minutes now. She stood among the stacked ingredient trays and the vacuum-sealed proteins and the labeled bins, and she could see her breath, and the refrigeration unit hummed its constant note, and she typed the company name she had seen on the booking documentation into her phone. She had glimpsed the documentation for 30 seconds while Greg was on the phone. She had a memory for glimpsed things, not photographic exactly, but specific, the way certain details stick when your brain has decided they are important before your conscious mind has caught up. She had remembered the company name and had been carrying it since Friday afternoon without examining it, the way you carry something in your coat pocket without taking it out until you are somewhere private. The company was a hospitality group. It operated restaurants and private dining venues and catering services across 4 cities, and its website was clean and minimal and used the language that establishments of a certain level used to communicate that they were not for everyone. Curated experience, bespoke service, an emphasis on discretion that was itself a kind of signal about the clientele it was designed for. All of this was exactly what it appeared to be. The hospitality group was a real business and a successful one, and it had nothing in its public-facing presence that would cause your eye to stop. But the hospitality group was owned by a holding company. And the holding company had a name. And when she typed that name, the results came back in the specific register of journalism that has been reviewed for legal liability before publication. The register of alleged and linked to and sources familiar with the matter indicated and under investigation regarding the language of saying what needs to be said without crossing the line into what would need to be defended in court. His name was Nikolai Voss. She read for 11 minutes. What she found was, in its broad outline, something she had suspected from the moment she saw the booking reference, confirmed and made more specific by the detail of the results. Nikolai Voss operated in multiple countries. His businesses were real and operational, and some of them were genuinely profitable from ordinary commercial activity. But the pattern of those businesses, the movement of capital through their structures, the specific partnerships and the specific resolutions of specific disputes with third parties who had subsequently gone quiet, read a certain way, with a certain understanding of how certain kinds of operations worked, the picture was not ambiguous. She was not an expert. She did not need to be an expert to understand what direction the picture pointed. The photographs: first, a courthouse, Nikolai Voss in a dark coat with his face angled away from the camera, giving nothing to the lens. Second, a charity gala, the kind of event that appears in the social pages of business publications, Nikolai Voss in formal wear beside a woman with dark hair and pearl earrings, the two of them positioned with the unconscious closeness of people who have been together long enough to stop negotiating space. Third, a construction site, Nikolai Voss in the foreground with several other men, all of them looking at something off-frame. In the charity gala photograph the caption read, Nikolai Voss, with Fiancée Elena, at the annual benefit for, she noted the charity name without processing it, her attention locked on the word fiancé, and on the woman beside him, and on the pearl earrings that were the same ones the woman in booth 4 on Tuesday night had been wearing. Elena Voss. Not yet, but the name she was heading toward. The woman with the pale blue dress and the composed blankness and the carefully precise words arriving in the wrong order. Below the photographs, a brief item from a business publication covering commercial real estate. A development dispute involving properties in 2 adjoining districts. Nikolai Voss's name appeared in connection with one party to the dispute. The other party was described as a former associate of Voss's organization. The dispute had resolved, the former associate had withdrawn from the project. The withdrawal was dated the Wednesday after Tuesday evening. 5 days ago. She read that sentence once. She read the sentence that described the withdrawal as happening abruptly and without public comment from the withdrawing party. She did not read either sentence a third time. She put her phone in her apron pocket. She stood in the freezer with her breath visible and the refrigeration unit humming and the stacked trays all around her, and she breathed 4 counts in and 4 counts held and 4 counts out, 5 times. The practice she had learned from a woman at her previous job who had been annoyingly calm in all situations and who had said, "The breath is the one thing you can always control, so start there when you can't control anything else." She started there. By the time she pushed back through the freezer door into the warmer air of the kitchen corridor, she had arrived at a position she could hold. The position was, she was here, she was working, she was going to do her job with the competence she always brought to it, and she was going to pay attention to the room in the way she always paid attention to rooms, and she was not going to let the information she had just gathered change the quality of her behavior in any direction she could not defend. She was a waitress in a restaurant. She had a function here. She was going to perform it. She went back out. She poured water. She managed her section. She cleared courses at the exact right intervals. She spoke to guests with the warm, professionally appropriate attention that formal service required and that she had spent years learning to perform with genuine quality rather than mechanical going through the motions. She moved through the room at the Maya glide and did not look at the center table more than her job required her to. Nikolai Voss thanked her when she brought the second wine course with a thank you that was simple and even and gave her nothing specific to read into it. She said of course and moved on. She did not look at Elena. She looked at Elena once, when she came around the far end of the table on a water refill, and found Elena already not looking at her in a way that was slightly too deliberate to be unconscious, which was the specific not looking of someone who had decided not to look. Near the end of the evening, when most of the guests had moved to their coats and the room was entering the quiet tail end of its close, Maya was resetting a side station with linen when she became aware of Elena standing in the corridor that connected the dining room to the kitchen. She had come from the direction of the restrooms, her coat now over her arm, and she was standing with the patience of someone who has decided to wait for something and who has the capacity to wait for as long as it takes. She was not hovering. She was not approaching. She was simply in the corridor, available, in the way of someone who is offering an encounter without requiring it. Nikolai Voss was at the far end of the dining room in conversation with 2 remaining guests. His back was not quite turned, but he was engaged, and his attention was on the conversation, not on the corridor. Elena looked at Maya. Tilted her head, once, very slightly, toward the kitchen door. Maya set down the linen she was folding. She walked to the corridor. It was dim in the hallway, the overhead fixtures here being less theatrical than the dining room's event lighting, and in that dimness Elena was different than she had been at either of their previous encounters. Not less composed, Elena, Maya was beginning to understand, was composed in the deep structural way that some people are, a composure that ran through the architecture of her rather than sitting on the surface of her. But differently composed. More direct. The composure of a person who has made a decision to be seen with some degree of accuracy, which is a different thing from the composure of a person who is managing what is seen. "I wanted to speak with you before we leave tonight," Elena said. I've been thinking about what to say for the past 3 weeks. You don't have to say anything, Maya said. Elena looked at her with an expression that was briefly, faintly impatient, the impatience of someone who has been told they don't have to do the thing they have decided to do and who finds the reassurance slightly presumptuous. I want to, she said. Please. Maya was quiet. Elena organized herself. Maya could see it, the brief internal arrangement, the selection of words from a prepared inventory. Not scripted. Structured. What you did on Tuesday evening, Elena began, was an act of genuine decency. I want you to understand that I'm saying this plainly, not as a courtesy, not because it seems like what should be said in this moment. It was an act of decency and it mattered, and I have not been able to stop thinking about it. She paused. It was also, from a certain angle, the disruption of something I was managing carefully. Maya waited. The man who was with me, Elena said, has been involved with my life in a professional capacity for some years. The involvement became problematic. I had been working to resolve it through specific channels, in a specific way, that required the situation to remain contained. Visible only to those who needed to see it. When you intervened, you made it visible in the restaurant. To the staff, to the other guests, to the building. She said this without accusation. With the precision of someone stating what happened rather than assigning blame for it. I understand if that created problems, Maya said. It complicated certain things, Elena said. Not in a way that cannot be managed. But it required adjustments. She met Maya's eyes. The man is no longer in a position to be a concern. The matter has been resolved. The word resolved settled in the air between them with its full weight and what it implied without stating. This is not something I would ordinarily share. But you are owed the information. Is anyone, Maya started. No one is in physical danger as a result of what has occurred, Elena said. The sentence was precisely constructed. She had chosen every word in it. Maya absorbed this. The freezer, she thought. Addressed, thoroughly. She set those thoughts down. I have a question, Maya said. I've been carrying it for 3 weeks. Ask it. Are you all right? Not with the situation. You personally. Are you all right? Elena went very still for a moment. Not the managed stillness she had worn in booth 4 on Tuesday. Something more genuine. Something that moved through the surface of her and showed briefly for what it was. I am, she said, and then, after a small pause, more than I was. Which is because of several things, and Tuesday is one of them. She looked at Maya with a directness that was almost uncomfortable in its completeness. You did something for me that I had not asked for and did not know I needed. I have been trying to reconcile those two facts. I wasn't doing it specifically for you, Maya said. I didn't know who you were. I would have done it for anyone. I know, Elena said. That is exactly what I mean. They stood in the dim hallway while the restaurant closed around them. Elena spoke then of what she was asking of Maya. Not demanding, not threatening, not with any pressure other than the weight of the ask itself. She said, go home, go back to your life, do not look further into what you found in whatever private space you used during this evening's service. Do not ask questions of people, do not discuss this with your coworkers, do not follow any thread further than it has already taken you. You have done something good, Elena said. Let it be good. Do not let it become something else. Maya said she understood. Elena held out her hand. Maya shook it. The grip was brief and firm and said something that the words had been circling around without quite landing. Elena turned and walked back toward the dining room with the same unhurried certainty she had brought to every movement Maya had seen from her. Maya stood in the corridor alone. The kitchen was settling into its post-service quiet behind her. The sounds of equipment being stored, voices low, someone running water. The ordinary sounds of the end of a night's work. She stood there for 2 minutes. breathing. Then she got her things from the back room and she walked out to the parking lot and she sat in her car in the light rain that had started while she was inside. She thought about the word that Elena had used. Resolved. She thought about the date on the news item. Wednesday. The day after Tuesday. She thought about the fact that she had gone into that freezer and found what she had found and had come back out and finished a full formal service event with her hands steady and her movements precise and her face exactly right, and that this was, perhaps, not quite what she had expected of herself before she had been required to do it. She was a waitress. She had a rule. She was very good at keeping it. She started the car. She drove home. She did not wake Carrie, who had work in the morning. She made herself tea in the dark kitchen and sat at the table and held the mug and did not think about resolved. She did not think about thoroughly. She thought about the pearl earrings, which for some reason were the thing she kept returning to, the detail that remained when she tried to set everything else down. The thing you keep when everything else is subject to change. The thing that stays consistent between the two nights, between the public version and the private version, between the woman with her wrist being held and the woman at the center of the table. She went to bed. She was asleep before she had decided not to think about it. 3 weeks passed and they were ordinary weeks. Not in the way that something extraordinary trying to seem ordinary is ordinary, not in the deliberate, slightly strained way of a person performing normalcy while thinking about something else. They were genuinely ordinary. The restaurant had its rhythms and Maya moved inside them with the competence of 6 years, and the weeks accumulated in the unremarkable way of weeks that do not contain any event requiring special attention. She worked Tuesday through Sunday and had her Mondays off. She did her grocery shopping on Sunday afternoons, the late ones, when the store was quiet and she could think and move at her own pace. She called her mother on Sunday evenings. Her mother worked as a school administrator in the city where Maya had grown up, a 4-hour drive from here, and called every second Sunday without fail and covered a consistent set of topics. Was Maya eating properly? Was she sleeping enough? Was there anything interesting happening in her life that she was not mentioning? Maya said she was eating properly and sleeping fine, which was largely true. She did not mention the private event. She had Wednesday evenings with a woman named Claire who worked in a bookshop and read approximately 3 novels per week and had strong and extensively argued opinions about each one. They had been friends since Maya's previous job, where Claire had come in every Wednesday at 7 and ordered the same meal, and eventually they had been talking long enough that the meal was finished and the table needed to be cleared for the next reservation, and Claire had given Maya her number without being asked, which was a very Claire thing to do. They met now at a bar near Claire's bookshop and drank wine and talked, and Maya did not mention the private event to Claire either. She did not mention it to anyone. She had made a deal about this and she kept the deal. The man who had sat at the bar with an untouched coffee did not come back after the private event. She noted his absence in the first week and then stopped noting it, because absence is not a thing you can keep a record of indefinitely. The booking did not recur. Greg's desk returned to its normal state of organized mild chaos. A few coworkers mentioned Tuesday in passing, with the sideways curiosity of people who had been in the room and who had the specific memory of the air going quiet before the man stood up. She told them the guest had left without incident, she had done what seemed right, it had been handled. She said this with the matter-of-fact finality that ended conversations, and they ended. Lily had gotten significantly better at the job in the 3 weeks since the private event. Maya did not know whether these two things were connected and did not spend time on the question, but she noticed that Lily had begun to read the room in a new way, not just reacting to what tables did but anticipating what they were about to need. The half-step ahead awareness that was the difference between a person who waited tables and a person who was good at waiting tables. Owen, the bartender, was visibly in the early stages of something with a woman named Beth who sometimes came in at closing, and he was treating this development with the specific tenderness of someone who was surprised by his own feelings and handling them carefully, like a person carrying something breakable for the first time. Maya liked this about him. She had always thought Owen was a person who deserved something careful. These were the textures of her ordinary life, and they reassembled themselves around the private event without visible disruption. She had done what she had done. She had learned what she had learned. She had made the deal and she was keeping it. Life had resumed. Except something in her attention had changed, and she felt it without being able to point at it precisely, the way you feel the difference in how a room sounds after the acoustics have been altered by a new piece of furniture. She was not more vigilant in the anxious, waiting for something to go wrong sense. She was not scanning the restaurant with the hyper-alert eyes of a person who has learned that rooms contain more than they appear to. She was not performing awareness for herself or for anyone else. But she was reading rooms differently. The reading she had always done, fast, accurate, running in the background while she managed the surface functions of the job, had developed a new quality, one she could not entirely name but that had something to do with foreground. Things she had always processed in the background were coming forward. The quality of a silence at a specific table. The way someone's body shifted in the middle of an ordinary evening. The look that passed between two people and contained more information than the look was advertising. She had always seen these things. She had catalogued and filed them and moved on. What had changed was what she did with the cataloging. Or, more precisely, whether she stopped. Whether she held the information for a moment longer. Whether she let herself fully process what the information said before she filed it and moved on. She thought about Elena more than she had expected to, and with more specificity than she had expected. Not about the situation, she had made the deal and the deal included not turning the situation over obsessively. But about Elena herself. The particular quality of her composure in booth 4, not the generic composure of a person keeping it together, but the specific, practiced composure of a person who had built a particular surface through years of kneading it and was maintaining it under conditions that would have dissolved a less well-built surface. The way she had moved through the private event with the ease of someone accustomed to these rooms, fully at home in them, who was also not, underneath, at home anywhere in the way Maya had been thinking about home. The pearl earrings kept coming back to her. She had thought about why, eventually, and had arrived at this: the pearl earrings were the consistent thing. Everything else about Elena had changed between Tuesday and Saturday: the dress, the hair, the rings' visibility, the room's expectations of her, but the earrings were the same in both settings. Small and round and exactly right in both contexts. The thing you hold on to. The thing that stays. She thought about the word resolved and then set it down. She thought about addressed, thoroughly, and set that down too. She was keeping the deal. 4 weeks after the private event, on a Thursday evening during a slow shift, a woman came in alone and sat at table 9. She was perhaps 45, with the look of someone who had come from a long day and had made a deliberate choice to eat somewhere nice rather than at home, as an act of something between self-care and self-maintenance. She ordered a glass of wine and the pasta, and she sat quietly and read something on her phone, and it was a thoroughly ordinary table in a thoroughly ordinary way. Except that after she had been sitting for about 20 minutes her phone rang, and she looked at who was calling, and she declined the call with the specific, flat efficiency of someone who declines a call because the person calling is the last person they want to speak to right now, not because they are busy. Then she put the phone face down on the table. She picked up her wine. She took a sip that was slightly larger than the previous sips. Maya, passing with a water refill, slowed. There was nothing urgent here. Nothing like booth 4, no man with his hand on anyone's wrist, no room quieting tension, no moment requiring action. It was a woman sitting alone at dinner who had declined a call. But Maya stood at the edge of the table and she said, with the warm and completely genuine quality she had for this, "Can I get you anything else right now? No rush at all on the food. If you need a minute, just take it." The woman looked up. She had the look of someone who had been in her own head and been brought back to the room by the specific quality of a voice that was not doing the thing voices in restaurants usually did, not performing cheerfulness, not running the script, but actually speaking. "I'm fine," the woman said. Then, after a pause, "Thank you. I'm fine. I'm Maya, Maya said, which she did not usually say to a solo table. I'll check back in a bit. If you need anything at all, just ask me. She moved on. She refilled water at the next table. She did not watch to see if the woman looked back at her. But on the way through later, the woman flagged her and ordered dessert and asked for the check at the same time, which was the body language of someone who has decided they are going to stay for a few more minutes of this particular warmth and is also preparing to leave with the dignity of someone who has her life under control. Maya brought the dessert and the check and said nothing specific, and the woman ate the dessert and left a 20 on a $40 check and was gone. It was not booth 4. Nothing had been required. Nothing dramatic had occurred. But Maya had opened the door. She had stood at the edge of a table and been present and offered something that was not in the service script and that had landed in a way she could feel, in the particular frequency of the quality of attention that had passed between them. She thought about this on the drive home. She thought about it in a way that was new, not as an anomaly to be processed and filed, but as something that belonged to her. As something she had done because it was part of who she was, and that she had, for some years before Tuesday, been managing to look away from. She thought about Elena in the corridor. You did something decent, let it be decent, let it be good. And she thought about how the advice made complete sense and was also incomplete, because it assumed that what she had done on Tuesday was discrete, a single event, contained, beginning and end, with nothing trailing behind it into the days that followed. But things that come from who you actually are do not stay discrete. They do not stay in the compartment you put them in. They move into the other compartments. They change what the other compartments contain. She was keeping the deal. She was not going further than what Elena had asked her not to go further than. But she was also, finally, somewhere she had been trying not to arrive at for 6 years, fully here. Not just in the room, moving at the Maya glide, processing and filing and keeping moving. But here. With the full capacity of her attention aimed at what the room actually contained. It was, she thought, the most expensive free thing she had ever acquired. She went home. She made dinner. She called her mother, who asked the usual questions. She said she was eating well and sleeping fine, which was true. She said things were going well at work, which was true in ways she was not going to elaborate on over the phone. She did not miss what she had been before Tuesday, which had been slightly less honest with herself about what she was capable of. She went to bed. The city made its continuous sound around the apartment, and the sound was ordinary and reliable and exactly what it always was, and she listened to it for a while before she slept. 6 weeks after the private event, on a Tuesday evening in December, she was carrying a tray of water glasses through the back section of the restaurant, moving at the Maya glide, when she looked up and saw the woman at table 7 go very still. She did not know the woman. She had been seated 20 minutes ago, had ordered a glass of water and the salmon and had settled into the particular quiet of a person eating alone who was comfortable with the aloneness. The man who had arrived 12 minutes after her had joined the table, had ordered without looking at the menu, had begun talking in the low, controlled way of someone who has something specific they want to accomplish in this conversation and is proceeding toward it. Now the woman was very still. Her hands were in her lap. Her body was turned fractionally away from the man, not dramatically, not in any way that would catch the eye of a person at the next table, just the slight lean of someone increasing the only distance available to them. Her eyes had a quality that Maya now recognized before she had language for it, the quality of a person assessing the space between where they are and where they need to be and finding the calculation unavailable. Maya set the tray down. She did not consciously make a decision. There was no decision, in the sense of a person weighing options and selecting between them. Her body had already made its choice and was covering the distance across the dining room before the part of her that used words had finished putting the situation into words. This was what 6 years of repetition and one Tuesday in October had built in her. The reflex had preceded the deliberation and had learned it could trust itself to do so. She was at the table. "Excuse me," she said. "Can I get anything for you? Or refresh the water?" The man looked up at her. He was perhaps 50, with the look of a man who was accustomed to conversations going the direction he intended them to go and who found interruptions mildly but genuinely inconveniencing. His face was not cruel. That was the thing that struck her, the way it struck her sometimes, how ordinary the faces were. How unremarkable. How complete the gap between what a face communicated and what the body attached to it was doing. "We're fine," he said. Not dismissively. Pleasantly, even. The pleasantness of a man who managed his public surface and managed it well. Maya looked at the woman. She held the woman's eyes for the count of one breath, and in that single breath she communicated, in the wordless frequency of two people in a room who understand something the room has not said, that there was a door and it was open. That she had seen. That whatever the woman needed, she only needed to indicate it, in whatever way she was able to indicate it, and Maya would respond. The woman looked back at her. And for a half-second something moved through her face, not dramatic, not anything the man beside her would have caught, just the very slight shift of a person who has just realized they are not alone in a room they thought they were alone in. Maya kept her face easy. She kept her posture professional and present. She stood at the edge of the table with her hands loose at her sides and she waited. "Actually," the woman said. Her voice was steady. She had steadiness in her, and Maya could feel it and was glad. "Can I get some more water, please?" "Of course," Maya said. She went to the water station. She took slightly longer than was strictly necessary, not long enough to be notable, just long enough to give the woman 2 more minutes of breathing room. She refilled the glass. She set it down. She made eye contact once more on her way past. Later, when the man excused himself for a moment and the woman was briefly alone, Maya was at the next table over and she said, quietly, "I'm right over at the station. If you need anything at all, ask for me specifically. My name's Maya." The woman held the glass in both hands. "Thank you," she said, and the 2 words carried what they needed to carry. Maya went back to her section. She did not know what the woman's situation was in its full detail. She did not need to know. She was not a detective, not a counselor, not anyone equipped to manage what was happening or to have managed what had happened before she arrived. She was a person in a room who had seen something and who had opened a door. What happened next belonged to the woman's own agency, the woman's own decisions, the woman's own life and the resources within it that Maya could not see or know. This was the thing she had been wrong about before Tuesday, the thing she had corrected. She had believed that opening the door meant you had to know what was on the other side of it. That you had to have a plan, a resolution, a clear line from your action to an outcome you could point at and call good. Without that certainty, she had argued with herself, you might make things worse. You might disrupt something being managed. You might put yourself between things you didn't understand and cause damage you couldn't predict. All of this was true. Elena had confirmed it. Elena had told her clearly, you disrupted something. The disruption had consequences I had to manage. This was not wrong to tell her. It was accurate and Maya had received it as accurate. But the alternative to opening the door, she now understood, was not safety. The alternative to opening the door was closing your eyes to what you saw and walking back to your section with the weight of what you had decided not to see, and carrying that weight in the specific and unexamined way that you carry things you have decided are not your business, and setting it in its compartment, and keeping moving, and arriving home at the end of a shift with slightly more weight than you left with and not knowing, after enough years, when the accumulation had changed the shape of you. She had chosen the door. She chose it again now. She did not know if the woman at table 7 would use it. She did not know whether anything significant was happening or whether she had read a perfectly ordinary dinner incorrectly, the way sometimes you read things incorrectly because you have become attentive to a specific frequency and start to find it where it may not exist. Both were possible. The woman's situation was her own. What Maya had offered was not rescue, she did not have rescue to offer, not in any meaningful sense. What she had offered was presence. Visibility. The specific gift of being seen by someone who saw. She moved through the rest of the shift. At 9:15, the man at table 7 paid the check and stood to go. The woman stood with him. As they were moving toward the exit, the woman paused at the hostess stand on the pretext of something Maya could not hear, a question about something, or saying good night, it was impossible to tell. She spoke to Petra, the hostess, briefly. Then she followed the man out. At the end of the evening, when the restaurant was closing and Maya was doing her side work, Petra came to find her. "The woman from 7 left something for you," Petra said. She held out a folded piece of paper. Maya opened it. It was a receipt from the hostess desk, a reservation card on the back, blank on the face, on which the woman had written a name, a number, and 2 words, "Thank you." Maya stood in the closing restaurant and held the card. She was not going to call the number. That was not the shape of her role in whatever this was. She was not a lifeline or a program or a continuing support structure. She was a person who had been in a room. But the card was evidence of something she found she needed to hold for a moment, evidence that the door had been visible, that it had been seen, that what she had done had landed in a way that meant something to the person she had done it for. She pocketed the card. She finished her side work. She drove home through the December city, which was wearing its pre-holiday look, lights on the trees along the main streets, the particular quality of cold air that comes in the weeks before the year ends, the city slightly more compressed and more present than it was in other seasons. She liked December in the city. She had liked it every year. She noticed this year that she was liking it with a quality of attention she hadn't previously brought to it, the full engagement of a person who was not half somewhere else. At home, Carrie was still awake, which was unusual for a weeknight. She was at the kitchen table with a mug of tea and her laptop and the look of someone who had been working late and was now in the decompression phase. "How was it?" Carrie said. Maya sat down at the table. She told her about the woman at table 7. Not everything, she did not have everything to tell. She told her the shape of it, the woman, the man, the stillness, the open door. The receipt at the end of the night. The 2 words on the back. Carrie listened. She was good at listening in the specific way that people are good at listening when they are not waiting to respond, when they are actually following what is being said and letting it be what it is. When Maya finished, Carrie was quiet for a moment. "You know," Carrie said finally, "when you described Tuesday to me at the time, you said it was a weird moment. You said it like it was something you were putting down." "I was trying to put it down," Maya said. "I know," Carrie said. "But it didn't stay down." "No," Maya said. "It didn't." Carrie picked up her mug. She was thinking about something, and Maya could tell because Carrie had a specific quality of quiet when she was thinking, attentive and slightly more still than usual, like a person listening to something just below the threshold of hearing. "Do you think about the woman?" Carrie said. "From Tuesday?" Maya considered the question honestly. "Sometimes," she said. "Not in a way I can do anything with. In a way that's more like, I'm aware that she's out there. That she has a life I'll never know anything about. That something happened between the 2 of us that meant something to both of us and then we moved in opposite directions and the thing we shared is still there, in both directions, even though we aren't connected anymore." Carrie looked at her for a moment. "That's a lot of wait for 47 seconds in a restaurant," she said. "I counted," Maya said. Carrie almost smiled. "I know," she said. "You always count." Maya went to bed. She lay in the dark in the quiet apartment and she listened to the city's December sound and she thought about the shape of the last 6 weeks and what they had made of her, which was something she had been before and was now more fully, which was a person who did not look away. She had not been transformed by Tuesday. She wanted to be precise about this, in the way she was precise about most things she applied honest internal attention to. She had not been changed into something she had not previously been. She had not discovered a new purpose or been recruited into anything or had any kind of experience that the word awakening would apply to without embarrassing her. What had happened was simpler and harder than any of those things. She had been confronted, in a room she knew well, with a moment that required the fullest version of herself, and she had produced it. And in producing it she had discovered that the fullest version of herself had been available all along, had been present in every room she had moved through for 6 years, had been there on every shift and every Wednesday with Claire and every Sunday call to her mother. She had simply been managing it. Keeping it at a controlled level, below the surface, in the compartment where she put things she wasn't sure what to do with. Tuesday had opened the compartment. Had made it impossible to close again. This was not entirely comfortable. It was, in fact, sometimes significantly uncomfortable. The full engagement of a person who is paying complete attention was more tiring than the partial engagement of someone who was paying sufficient attention and letting the rest run in the background. She felt the rooms she was in more directly. She carried more of what they contained. She went home at the end of some shifts with a weight she had not previously accumulated over the course of a single evening. But she would not trade it back. This was the thing she knew with the clean certainty of something that does not require repeated examination. She would not have the compartment back if she could. She would not go back to the version of herself that moved through rooms at the Maya Glide and catalogued everything she saw and set it in its place and kept moving, fully competent and half present. She was all the way here now. She was in every room she was in, completely, and the rooms knew it, and the people in them knew it even when they did not know they knew it, and some of those people, on some of those evenings, found in it something they had needed and had not been expecting to find. This was enough. It was not glamorous and it was not the thing people meant when they talked about meaningful work, and it did not appear in any category of significance that she had been raised to aspire to. It was a person in a restaurant, moving through rooms, paying the fullest possible attention, opening doors. But it was real. And it was hers. And she had not manufactured it from anything other than what she had always been, which was herself, more completely. 3 days later she received a letter. Actual paper, an envelope addressed to her by name at the restaurant, passed along to her by Greg with the slightly bewildered air of a man who had not expected to be handling physical correspondence in the course of his week. Inside was a single card, cream-colored, heavy stock, with a firm's letterhead she did not recognize and a brief typewritten note. The note informed her that a donation had been made in her name to the organization she had specified to the caller in the parking lot 6 weeks ago, and that the organization had been notified of the source of the gift. The amount, stated on the second line, made her read the line twice. There was no signature. No name. No return address. She stood in the back room of the restaurant holding the card for a long moment. She thought about Elena in the corridor, the direct look and the firm brief handshake and the quiet instruction, go home, live exactly as you were living before Tuesday, do not follow any thread further than it has already taken you. She had done that. She had kept the deal in every detail. The deal, it turned out, had not been a closing. It had been something else, a line drawn around what was appropriate for her to pursue, a definition of the correct shape of her role in what had happened, which was a role with a beginning and an ending and no obligation beyond its own completion. She had played the role correctly. She had done the thing she was positioned to do, which was to see what she saw and respond to it and then step back. The card in her hand was a receipt of some kind. Not for what she had done, she did not think of what she had done on Tuesday as a transaction. But a receipt for the fact that someone on the other side of a very particular divide had seen her clearly, had understood what she was, and had wanted her to know that what she was had been valued. She put the card in her bag. She went back out to the floor. The dinner rush was beginning. Tables were filling, orders were coming in, the room was building toward its peak pressure hour. She picked up a tray and moved into the section with the Maya Glide, and the room received her the way rooms received her, seamlessly, as though she had always been exactly where she was, and she paid the full attention of a person who was all the way here, and the people in the room felt it even when they did not know they felt it. She was a waitress in a restaurant on a Tuesday evening in December. This was her life and she was in it, completely. She kept moving, which was the rule, which had always been the rule, which she understood now in its fullest sense. Move toward what you see, cover the distance between yourself and what is real, bring the whole of yourself into every room you enter, and do not, under any circumstances, pretend that what you see in rooms is not your concern. It was always her concern. She had just taken 6 years to stop arguing about it.